In the darkness before dawn, the sea felt almost hollow, as if the Pacific itself were holding its breath. Deep inside USS England, soundman John Prock pressed his headphones tighter, chasing a faint pulse rising through 300 feet of black water. It was the kind of sound a man only hears after hours of strain. Propellers cavitating, metal shifting under pressure, a living machine trying to disappear into the ocean's endless silence. Prock's back ached, his eyes burned, and the last of his coffee had gone cold long ago, but he didn't dare look away. Somewhere beneath him, a Japanese submarine was twisting through the depths, using every trick its commander knew to break free. One wrong move, one lost echo, and the hunter would become the hunted. Above the sonar room, officers moved quietly, waiting for a signal they could trust. No one on board knew that this moment, this thin thread of sound in the dark, was part of a streak unlike anything in naval history. No one knew the cost, no one knew the stakes. What does it take for an unremarkable escort ship to become the most lethal submarine hunter of the Pacific War? The war in the Pacific had entered a stage where silence could be deadly. Japanese submarines, from the massive I-class boats to the smaller but agile Rho-class vessels, moved through the Solomon Islands and the waters off New Guinea with alarming freedom. Their mission was not glamorous. They scouted, they shadowed American convoys, they reported fleet movements that shaped Japan's decisions at sea, and when the moment was right, they struck. For months, American commanders understood the scale of the problem, but lacked the means to solve it. Sonar could find a submarine, but it could not hold the contact through the final seconds of an attack. The blind spot, that vanishing act at 200 yards, turned every close-range run into a guess, and in war, guessing was a luxury no escort ship could afford. Depth charges detonated with thunder, but thunder meant very little when a submarine could slip away unseen. The early war kill rate told the truth more plainly than any report, 3%. Most attacks simply failed. Into this landscape stepped a weapon that promised to change the odds. The Hedgehog was not elegant, it was purposeful. 24 contact-fused projectiles hurled forward in a tight elliptical pattern, detonating only when they struck steel. No more guessing, no more waiting for the water to calm. Silence meant a miss, explosions meant a kill. The British had built it from bitter lessons in the Atlantic. The United States adopted it out of necessity. But only a handful of ships carried it in early 1944. USS England was one of them. The ship herself was modest. A Buckley-class destroyer escort with reliable engines, steady handling, and a crew of 186 men. What she lacked in size, she made up for in discipline. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton commanded the ship, but he was the first to admit that his executive officer, Lieutenant John Williamson, possessed the sharper instinct for anti-submarine warfare. Pendleton trusted him completely. During combat, Williamson would take the con. Training off the California coast had forged the crew into a unit that moved with quiet precision. Williamson drilled them endlessly. Hedgehog attacks at dawn, sonar tracking in heavy seas. Emergency maneuvers repeated until muscle memory replaced hesitation. Soundmen like John Prock and Roger Bernhard learned to recognize the faint signatures of underwater life: cavitation, hull pops, ballast flooding. They learned to hear the difference between an echo and a presence. By early 1944, the crew felt ready. But readiness did not guarantee opportunity. Their first months in the Pacific were spent escorting convoys in uneventful stretches of ocean, carrying out a mission vital but unremarkable. The men watched the horizon and wondered whether all their training would ever be tested. The test arrived on the 18th of May, 1944. American codebreakers intercepted a message that changed everything. A Japanese submarine, I-16, was traveling to resupply garrisons near Bougainville. Its course and timing were laid bare. For the first time, USS England was being sent not to guard others, but to hunt. The hunt for I-16 began under a hard afternoon sun on the 19th of May 1944. A patrol aircraft had spotted the submarine on the surface, and for the first time, USS England closed in not on a possibility but on a certainty. Williamson reduced speed to steady the sonar picture. Prock tracked the contact 8 knots, 150 feet down steady, unaware. When the first Hedgehog salvo hit the water, the submarine reacted too late. A series of detonations rippled upward through the hull of the escort ship. 20 minutes later, oil and fragments surfaced. England had her first kill. It should have been an extraordinary moment. Instead, it became the opening act. 3 days later, in the pre-dawn darkness of May 22, radar aboard USS George caught another submarine on the surface. Row 106 tried to escape in a crash dive, pushing toward depths that strained her pressure hull. She twisted, turned, and clawed her way through the water, but England's sonar operators clung to the contact. Williamson recognized a rhythm, alternating turns 40 seconds apart. When he aimed the second salvo ahead of the expected maneuver, the ocean answered with a violent, unmistakable detonation. Row 106 never resurfaced. But the pattern of contact, evasion, and kill intensified with Row 104 on May 23. This submarine commander was experienced, deliberate, measured. For 2 hours, Raby and George made repeated attacks. Every one failed. The water churned with turbulence from depth charges and Hedgehog splashes. The submarine refused to be cornered. When England arrived, Williamson changed the geometry of the hunt. Instead of chasing the submarine's wake, he positioned the ship ahead of its projected course and waited. Row 104 emerged from the depths at the worst possible moment, driving straight into the elliptical pattern of 24 descending projectiles. The explosions came in a cluster, sharp and final. 3 submarines in as many days. Word spread like a current across the Pacific Fleet. But the most dangerous test had yet to come. Before dawn on May 24, Prock detected another contact, Row 116. This commander, unlike the others, fought back with intent. The submarine fishtailed to break the sonar beam. It shifted depth in rapid bursts. It transmitted loud, interfering pulses to create a wall of false echoes. For the first time, the ocean seemed to fight on the enemy's side. Prock strained to separate truth from noise. Williamson made run after run, adjusting for the chaos, until a final salvo triggered a small cluster of explosions. Not the sharp thunder of a catastrophic kill, but the grinding collapse of a wounded hull flooding in the dark. Hours later, oil and fragments drifted to the surface. 4 submarines in 5 days. The sea had not seen anything like it, and yet the hunt was far from over. By May 26, the crew of USS England was running on exhaustion. Sleep came in stolen minutes. Muscles ached. Even the steady hum of the ship's engines felt heavier than usual. They were on their way to Manus for fuel and ammunition when the sea presented them with another test. Shortly before midnight, Raby detected a surface contact, Row 108. The groan that rolled through England's passageways was quiet but unmistakable. They had just enough Hedgehog rounds for one final shot. Row 108 dove before the destroyer escorts closed in. Raby lost contact. George searched the darkness in widening arcs. Then Prock, unshakable even through days of strain, called out a clean, unmistakable sonar return. Williamson maneuvered England into position for a single, unforgiving attack. At 2,323, 12 projectiles left the launcher. 2 seconds of silence followed. Then multiple detonations rose through the hull. Row 108 broke apart, and 53 men disappeared with her into the black water. 5 submarines in 8 days. It was a record that should have ended there, but war seldom respects limits. On May 31, the last submarine of the picket line, Row 105, found itself trapped in a shrinking cage of American warships. For 24 hours, destroyers Hazelwood, Hole, Heerman, and McCord hammered the sea with depth charges and Hedgehog attacks. Each time, the submarine twisted free. She hid in thermal layers, maneuvered into positions that forced the Americans to withhold fire, and dove through pockets of disturbed water to break sonar contact. The commanders aboard Row 105 fought with a level of discipline that slowed the noose tightening around them. At dawn, England arrived. Commander Haynes, overseeing the hunt, sent the briefest of instructions. The message would become famous. "Oh hell, go ahead, England." Williamson understood instantly. The other ships had pushed Row 105 into a narrow funnel between Raby and George. Any attack required precision. Too shallow a salvo could endanger friendly ships. Too deep, and the submarine would slip beneath the spread. Prock gave the bearing. Bernhard confirmed the depth trace. The room fell silent. At 0729, the Hedgehog launcher fired. 6 to 10 detonations answered moments later, followed by a deep, rolling explosion that seemed to lift the ocean itself. Row 105 was gone. 55 men vanished with their captain, including Submarine Division 51's commander, Captain Kato Ryonosuke. In 12 days, 6 submarines had fallen. The cost to Japan was not only the lives of its submariners, but the collapse of a reconnaissance line meant to warn of American carrier movements. For USS England, the cost was measured differently: sweat, discipline, and a crew stretched to the edge of human endurance. It was a triumph born not from glory, but from relentless pressure and the quiet, unbreakable resolve of men who refused to fail. The destruction of Japan's scouting line spread far beyond the quiet arcs of water where each submarine disappeared. In military terms, the impact was immediate and unmistakable. Japan had relied on its submarines not as commerce raiders but as eyes and ears for the combined fleet. Their mission was reconnaissance, early warning, and the opportunity to strike at major American warships when conditions favored them. Losing 6 boats in 12 days did more than thin their numbers. It blinded them. American commanders recognized the shift almost at once. The collapse of the picket line meant the Japanese no longer possessed a coherent picture of the movements of American carrier groups pushing toward the Marianas. Without submarine reports, Japan entered the Battle of the Philippine Sea effectively blind. Their pilots flew into the largest carrier battle of the war without accurate intelligence on American disposition, a disadvantage that contributed to the decisive American victory known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Strategically, the lesson echoed through every level of the U.S. Navy. Technology mattered. Hedgehog changed anti-submarine warfare by closing the blind spot that had protected submarines for years. But technology alone did not explain England's results. Other ships carried Hedgehog. None matched her record. What set England apart was a fusion of intelligence, doctrine, and training. American codebreakers provided the targeting information. Williamson's relentless preparation sharpened the crew. The ship's operators turned practice into instinct, and instinct into action. In Washington and Pearl Harbor, senior officers took note. England's patrol validated investments in forward-firing weapons and reinforced the importance of radio intelligence. But the world outside the Navy saw something else. A small escort ship, modest in appearance, rising through skill and discipline to deliver a strategic blow disproportionate to her size. Even among America's allies, the effectiveness of combined technology and intelligence reinforced broader truths about modern naval warfare. For Japan, the psychological cost was severe. Submarine commanders who once maneuvered with confidence became cautious, spending long periods submerged at speeds too slow for effective reconnaissance. They knew that a new threat existed in the Pacific, even if they did not yet understand its nature. Fear of the unknown can be as crippling as the weapon itself. In the end, the events of May 1944 reshaped the undersea balance of the Pacific War, marking a turning point where American mastery of intelligence, technology, and seamanship converged into undeniable strategic advantage. When the last echoes of the May patrol faded, USS England returned to Manus, not as a ship changed by victory, but as one marked by the quiet weight of what had been done. 6 submarines had vanished beneath the Pacific, each carrying crews whose stories ended in silence. The men aboard England understood that success in war often leaves little room for triumph. It leaves only the certainty that someone else will live because you did your job. The legacy of those 12 days lies not in statistics, but in the clarity of the lessons they revealed. War is shaped by technology, but defined by people. The Hedgehog gave England a way to strike. Intelligence gave her the ability to find her targets, but training and discipline turned possibility into certainty. In the darkness of the sonar room, in the narrow spaces of the bridge, in the rhythm of the engineering plant, the ship's crew proved that preparation is the real backbone of survival. That truth followed England long after the patrol. Even when she was struck by a kamikaze off Okinawa in 1945, losing 37 of her own, the same spirit carried her home under her own power. It is easy to measure a ship by her victories. Harder but more honest, to measure her by the resolve of the men who refused to abandon her. History did not preserve USS England. She was scrapped in 1946, her steel recycled like hundreds of wartime vessels. Yet her name endures because she embodied a principle as old as naval warfare itself. Courage, amplified by skill, can alter the course of a campaign. The Pacific War turned on many hinges, but for a brief moment in May 1944, the hinge was a single destroyer escort and the men who served aboard her. The battle may be over, but its lessons still speak. What do you see in the story of USS England? The power of training, the cost of war, or the enduring responsibility carried by those who face danger so others do not? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value these journeys into the past, consider subscribing. The history of our world is still being written, one story at a time.